I'm Neil McCormick and you're watching Needle Time, where today we will be manoeuvring orchestrally in a dark space with Paul Humphreys of Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. Hi, Paul.
Hi, nice to be here.
You are the second member of Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark to join us on Needle Time, which means we've had the full complement, really. And of course, known as one of the groundbreaking electronic pop groups of, well, the modern era, because that's where it all started. But presumably you didn't start as an electronic musician. So what's got you started in music in the first place?
Me personally, my hobby always, sort of growing up, well, from being sort of like 9 or 10, I was fascinated with electronics.
Right.
And so I used to build things from being an early teen. Right. And I used to kind of get my my grandma's and my auntie's broken radios and take all the parts off, because I had no money to go buy parts. So I used to take all the parts off and get circuit diagrams and build things. And so, you know, I built a lot of our early sort of synths and music making machines. And but I started out, you know, that was my interest in electronics. I kind of worked as a roadie, fixing gear for a school band.
Right. Okay.
That Andy was the singer of.
Okay. Andy McCluskey.
Andy McCluskey, yeah.
My
fellow manoeuvrer.
Manoeuvrer, yes. Your fellow darkened and orchestral manoeuvrer.
Yeah. So I kind of started as a roadie fixing gear, and then Andy and I we realised that we liked the same kind of music. We were interested in a lot of the German. This was sort of 1974, 75. Oh. We realised that we both loved Kraftwerk.
Okay. So do you remember when you first heard Kraftwerk then?
I do. I remember hearing it on the radio, and it was the sort of the first day of the rest of my life. I thought, what on earth is this? I mean, and I love it.
How different did it sound then to everything that was around, and why did it sound that different?
Well, I think, I mean, first of all, it was synths. You know, it's electronic music.
But synthesizers, we know, were being used. It's always surprising to me now, as we go into the history, and you find out that the Beatles were using a synthesizer on Abbey Road.
That's right, and mellotrons and things like that. But it was used in such a way that was so kind of anti-rock music. It sounded like the future to me. I mean, you know, the Beatles used it in their sort of songs, but it sounded like the future. But for me, it was like this is leading us somewhere.
Did you immediately think this was the kind of music you were going to make, and what was how would you go about doing it as a couple of school kids in Liverpool?
Liverpool, the world.
Yeah, in the middle of the 70s.
Yeah, well, we. As I say, you know, I was the roadie for this kind of school band that was kind of a bit of a rock band. And Andy and I discovered we had this sort of love of the same kind of music. But this band were making sort of rock music, and I was interested in learning the piano, so I bought myself a little organ and an electric piano, and actually joined this rock band.
Okay.
Just playing basic keys. I couldn't really play very well, but I just kind of joined in. You know? And the more I learned how to play, the more I was enjoying it, and started writing songs. And Andy at that time was the main sort of songwriter in that band. And but after this, so I was kind of in this rock band. It was the Id, it was called. Right. And but what we used to do was we used to stay behind after the band's rehearsal and just experiment together.
But playing what?
We're just playing my organ and piano, but I'd built these kind of mad noise-making machines that never made the sort of same noise every time we switched it on. But we used to sort of bang them down, echo machines.
What would you build something like that?
Well, we had a tubaphone, which was this huge tube that we had this kind of speaker at one end, and we used to kind of put. It was like a synth, but you used to have to make connections on the circuit board to make it make different sounds. It would go down this tube, microphone at the other end, down an echo machine. And it was all incredibly experimental and unmusical in a way. But we loved the soundscapes and the textures we were making. But it just wasn't
a few people are starting, you know, there's Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, Bowie is starting to discover the potential of the synthesizer. Yeah. Did you feel part of something that was
didn't really feel like part of any kind of movement. I mean, we just thought we were just no-hopers. We were just doing it for fun. It was a hobby for us. And all our friends who heard these kind of electronic soundscapes we were making just thought it was just weird and thought we were no-hopers. And so everyone told us what we were doing was rubbish, so we kind of believed them.
Okay.
So it wasn't until 1978 that we dared to take some of our weird and wonderful experiments on stage.
Right. Playing what? What instruments by now?
Well,
had you amassed?
We found that there was 2 guys on the Wirral that actually had synthesizers,
Right.
and so we befriended these 2 guys so that we could borrow their synths. We had a choice of 2 when one wasn't doing a gig. Hopefully, when one was doing a gig, we hoped one of them wasn't, so we could borrow one of their synths.
So Andy, in OMD, as we know, Andy played the bass. Was that what he was doing?
Because we started with traditional instruments. I mean, because electronic instruments, synthesizers were prohibitively expensive. We were 2 working class boys from Liverpool, we had money. So, I mean, and even the bass Andy played, he wanted to buy a bass guitar, and he went to the second-hand bass store, and he'd kind of had a whip round with his family, and he had, I think, 25 quid, and he went to the second-hand shop that sold basses, and the only right-handed bass, he's right-handed, was 30 quid, but they had a left-handed bass that was 25. So he bought a left-handed bass and played it upside down. And he stuck with that bass for ages and learnt to play upside down. So now he plays a right-handed bass, but with the strings upside down. And bass players look at him going, what? E strings at the bottom? What? Okay. But yeah, I mean, we had to kind of make do with whatever we could get and find or make.
You chose possibly the most pretentious name in the history of all popular music.
Absolutely. The thing was, it didn't matter because, as I said, we believed our friends that we were rubbish. So it was kind of like a dare to go on stage, and we'd heard there was because with our rock band we'd played Eric's club in Liverpool, and they kind of, the guy there who ran the place kept, a guy called Roger Eagle, he used to keep in touch with us and asked us if we wanted to support Joy Division at Eric's, and so we said, well, we don't have the id anymore. We have this new band. We're doing sort of electronic stuff. And he said, oh, I'd love to hear that. Why don't you just support Joy Division and come along and play? But he said, what you called? And we said, well, we don't know. I haven't thought of a name yet. And he said, well, you've got about 3 hours to think of a name before I advertise it. So we went running back to Andy's house, and he used to scrawl song titles on the wall. And one of them was Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. It was a song that hadn't existed. It was just a potential song title. And we thought, oh, what the hell, it's one gig.
Right.
You know, we thought it kind of, so people knew that they weren't getting a rock band or a punk band, or they knew they were getting something strange with Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, so that's why we chose it. But of course, stuck with it now.
Okay. That gig of a couple of No Hope has obviously led on to an entire career. Was it apparent to you after that gig that there was more to it? Was it good? Was there a moment? What happened?
Well, we surprisingly didn't get things thrown at us, which is a good start. I didn't have to duck. And people around us, the people at the club and the people with Joy Division, said that they thought what we were doing was great, and so they offered us to play at the Factory Club in Manchester. Right. Do you want to go and play there? And so we said, oh yeah, all right, we'll do one more gig. Okay. And so we went there, and that was where we met Tony Wilson from Factory Records.
And he said, let's make a record. Did you have electricity then?
We were playing electricity in the set. Yeah.
You see, but it sounds like a classic song there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, we had a rough recording of it, and see, Tony Wilson was, we didn't know he was starting a label, but we saw him, he was on this TV show called Granada Reports, and he always put local bands on, so we cheekily gave him a cassette of Electricity and said, can we get on your TV show? We'd love to get on the telly. You know, just being cheeky, really.
It does sound like a classic single. It's got a really catchy hook line. It's got a very streamlined pop format, but it's got electronic sounds.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, it was our sort of... It was actually the first proper song Andy and I ever wrote together as songwriters. It was our first song that was actually a structured song instead of mad, bonkers experiment.
I'm Neil McCormick, and you're watching Needle Time with my guest, Paul Humphreys. Your career, did it take off very quickly? It seems to have taken off.
It did remarkably quickly, really, because we went from just this one-off crazy gig to a deal with Factory Records, and then Tony Wilson said to us, well, this is pop music, this is the future of pop music, what you're doing, electronic music. And we said, yeah, we were kind of insulted, really, because we thought we were experimental, and it was like, you know, this isn't pop music, this is just experimental electronica. but you know, he recognised that we had catchy tunes, which we didn't recognise at that point.
Okay.
That were kind of commercial. So he said to us, look, Factory won't be big enough for you, I'm going to help you get a major record deal. And we said, yeah. And he did. He sent cassettes around all the labels in London, and quite a few responded.
You wound up very quickly on Top of the Pops. Now that's kind of a dream for every young, musician growing up in the UK, is to get on Top of the Pops.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing. We watched it as kids, didn't we?
So what was your first Top of the Pops like?
The first Top of the Pops was amazing, actually. Well, in fact, we almost missed it because Messages was our first one, our first single that charted in order to get Top of the Pops. And we were in Brussels, and we were just leaving the hotel, and we were on a very, very long drive, and because this was days before mobile phones. And there was a guy running out of the hotel after us as we were leaving. And we thought, right, someone's not paid the bill, should we just kind of accelerate? But we stopped, and it was a phone call from the record company saying, get over to London now, forget where you're going, get on a plane now, we booked your tickets. Because we were filming Top of the Pops that afternoon.
There was this kind of odd time, pop music was in a period of change, and you'd get kind of middle of the road act, and
it was incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
I mean, when you watch some of these episodes back, on the reruns that they have on the Beeb from that era, I mean, there was just incredible diversity.
But around that time, what we now call electronica, which was kind of synth music, I don't know what we called it at the time, synth music.
Synth music, I think, yeah.
Was starting to coalesce and become a thing. It was coming out of a kind of punky side of things, and as you say, out of the experimental. It had an image of being cold, futuristic.
That's right. It was a battle.
Gary Newman was the first big pop star.
That's right. He just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. How did you feel about Gary Newman?
Well, I love Gary as a person, and we were just shocked that he just came from nowhere and had a #1 hit, and it was like, well, how did that happen? Where did he come from? But then we realised that there was pockets all over the UK of musicians listening to the same kind of music we were. We just thought we were kind of weird listening to, we get all these German imports, and be listening to Kraftwerk and Neu and La Dusseldorf and all of these other bands, and but it was obvious that there were other people around the country had tapped into what was coming out of Germany, and Gary Newman being one of them.
How driven by the technology was it? Because obviously these are electronic boxes that make sounds, and they are presumably improving on a yearly basis. I don't know.
Yeah, they were kind of. Yeah. Well, they were getting cheaper and more accessible. The Japanese had started making much cheaper synthesizers, because there was things around like the Moog and things like that, but they were thousands and thousands of pounds, where you could buy like our first synth we bought on Andy's mum's mail order catalogue for £7.25 a week for 38 weeks. And so you could buy you could buy synths. So all of a sudden this whole palette of sound, this sort of a new palette of sound that no one had really heard properly before, was open to anyone to use.
I find it interesting because nowadays people talk about analog synths, which is like a contradiction of what this idea was that the synths were replacing analog instruments in the first place, and now they talk about these analog synths, and they talk about these old synths as if they have a particular flavour and character, like a Steinway piano or something, and there's a kind of fetishization of nostalgia for synthesizers.
Yeah, I've noticed this a lot with some younger electronic bands now. They're all kind of sort of working out in this very kind of nerdy way what we were all using in those days, and trying to buy them up on the on eBay, and we're happy to sell them to them because those analog synths never work properly. We're happy with the digital ones.
So what was your approach? Were you building it off sounds that you were finding, or were you, because you had pop music, you had pop songs, or were you writing your pop songs on guitars and then just adding it to...
and converting them to no. We kind of started... We never really started a song in a very conventional way. We always started it from a very sort of obtuse angle. We'd start with a sort of a sound palette or a crazy noise that we liked. And after a while, it would just kind of build into a song, but it was always the top line, like the melody, the hook of the song, whether it be vocal or a keyboard line, would be the last thing we put on there. Okay. So it didn't start from the hook. It started from the other end. It started from experimenting till we thought, well, we better make this palatable.
Surprised by
the hook on the top. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kept thinking we were going to get found out, really. I mean, our first record deal, we signed a 7-album deal with Dindisk, which was subsidiary of Virgin, and we had this huge advance. And we thought, right, well, we're never going to get past the first album because it's not going to sell and we'll get dropped. So let's spend this entire advance on building a fantastic recording studio in Liverpool, so that when they drop us, at least we've got a little business to fall back on.
And did you do that?
We did that, yeah. So, and we kept thinking, but we were on this kind of roll, which the first album did well, and the second album with Enola Gay was a massive hit around Europe, and first of all, Messages was hit in the UK, and then Enola Gay around Europe, and we were just expanding, and then we did Architecture Morality that sold millions, with 3 massive singles that sold really well around the world. And all of a sudden we were on this roll, and we thought we had the Midas touch. Then we did Dazzle Ships, which sold really poorly, and we lost sort of 90% of our audience.
Were you surprised? Because
looking back, no,
is the experimental album you thought you were making in the first place.
In the first place, yeah, we forgot to put the tunes on that one. Yeah. But looking back. And we re-released it a few years ago, and when we first released it, the reviews were horrendous. But when we re-released it a few years ago, we got 5-star reviews everywhere for it. So perhaps it was just a bit ahead of its time. I know fans still think it's their favourite, still cite it as their favourite record
because it's the most difficult, and you have to spend more time.
Yeah,
and when you spend more time getting into something, and you turn that key and it unlocks, it's all the more.
Well, I think everyone was expecting Architecture Morality No. 2 because it was such a massive album. They just expected more of that. But I think there was a record company person that we were dealing with at the time who said to us, right, all you have to do now is do Architecture Morality No. 2 and you'll be the next Genesis. And so we thought, right, not going to do that then. I don't want to be the next Genesis. So it sent us down this kind of alley. And also we got more political. Because we were always politically active anyway, but it never appeared in our songs. And we were becoming criticised for that. And so we thought, right, let's write an album about the Cold War then.
Okay, let's write an experimental album about the Cold War. That'll get the kids. McCormick and Needle Time with Paul Humphreys of Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. Not just any manoeuvres. I've had Andy as a guest on this show. He's a very different character to you.
We are very different people.
Okay.
Which I think it really helps the fact that we are very different people. I mean, we always admit to the fact that we're completely different kinds of people. He's far more outgoing. He's more of the lead singer, if you like. Even though he is the lead singer, he kind of has the persona of a lead singer as well. And but I love him for that. And so, I mean, the great thing about OMD, I mean, you know, Andy and I, we went to primary school together. We've known each other since we were 7 years old.
Okay.
And so so we're like family, really. And so.
So how does that work in the creative process, in the writing of a song? You know, are you the quiet guy at the back doing all the work?
I can't say this on camera, can I? Andy may say it. No, actually, we have marked sort of lines.
Okay.
I mean, basically the way we work is that we get together in one room. Because I live in London, Andy lives in Liverpool. And so we tried, when we did the History of Modern album, for instance, we tried to work, you know, by sending files down the internet, all incredibly modern. But we found we couldn't, what we were writing just didn't work. We needed to be in a room together. So when we write songs, I go up to his place where he lives right in the middle of nowhere, where it's really, really quiet, and we can just focus on writing. And so we do a whole period of writing, and then we go away. And I usually we kind of sketch out, you know, songs, but then I bring the ideas back to London. I work on all the music. Andy works on the lyrics and the words, and then we get back together and we kind of hone that up. So basically, you know, Andy does a lot more of the lyrics and the
when you were
conceptual side of things. Andy's
having this first period of success, did you, apart from you know, this success can drive people very mad. You know,
Yeah.
you've got fame and success, but apart from the madness of making a conceptual album about the Cold War. When you're a
Some
pop
people
star,
thought we were really mad when we
yeah.
did
Did you enjoy fame and fortune? How did it change your life?
Well, first of all, we never made a fortune.
Okay.
I mean, we were battling throughout the 80s with our record deal that we signed when we were kids. Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible deal. And, I mean, we got to Architecture Morality and we'd sold millions and millions of records. Andy was still living at home with his mum, and so was I. And we looked at each other one day and said, what's wrong with this picture? Where's all the money? And so we went back to Branson and said, look, give us a reason why we should make another album, because this isn't working. Because we were on such a small percentage, yet we were taking advances. Like, touring was incredibly expensive in those days, and ticket prices were really low. And so we were taking these big advances to pay for the tours, but we were paying back at a very small percentage because of the deal we'd signed.
Right.
So we said, look, you've got to increase the percentage, otherwise this isn't working. It's not a viable concern, you know. Well, yes, he did, but then he added another 3 albums onto the 7. So we then had a 10-album deal that still wasn't a great deal.
Right.
And so it really wasn't until we got, I mean, we got to our 7th album, and we owed Virgin £1 million.
Okay.
So we did a greatest hits then. We didn't want to do a greatest hits, but we did it just to pay off our debts. And it wasn't until the 90s when we started till we stopped, when we made some money, because we didn't have to keep sinking all our royalties into running the band.
Okay, let's talk about running band in those days. You're talking about an electronic synthesizer-based outfit in the 80s and early 90s, before digital technology of the modern day. So what did that involve?
The what, sorry?
Before the digital era. So what did it involve going on the road?
Going on the road, well, going on the road was just, with those analog synths, was just a nightmare.
What could go wrong?
Everything. I mean, there was one night we were in, I mean, we had, as well as the synths, we had things like mellotrons and stuff. And this thing called a Fairlight, which was like a £25,000 music-making machine that you know, it's the dumbest thing ever. I mean, my smartphone is about 100,000 times smarter than that thing was. But it cost us 25 grand. It was always breaking down. But we had this mellotron, and I do remember we were playing in the middle of France somewhere, some kind of small town in France. And because it was mechanical, everyone in the town was using electric cookers, and it dropped the power so far down that I couldn't get the mellotron in tune because the spinning motor was going too slow. So we had to wait until everyone had finished cooking before we could go on stage.
What does an electronic band do if it breaks down on stage? I mean,
Andy does a big line in jokes.
He does a big line in jokes.
Yeah, yeah. He has a list of jokes to tell.
Obviously, the way you started out making music was experimental because you're trying to work it out as you go along. But you know, you finessed a kind of form of electro pop that is very melodic. Isn't that you could play a lot of those songs on an acoustic guitar and they're still going to sound lovely? Do you think there's a fundamentally different way that electronic music is made to acoustic or, you know, non-synthesizer music?
Well, I think it really depends on the song, really, because I mean there are some songs that we have done that, I mean, for instance, we play a lot with an orchestra. There's an orchestra in Belgium that we go out on the road with quite often, and in fact last December we did a whole German tour.
What do you bill it as? Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark with orchestra?
Well, it's called the Night of the Proms tour,
Okay.
actually, and there's us with a few other bands do it. And I think Simple Minds are doing it at the moment, actually. But some of those songs do translate amazingly to a full orchestra. But some songs we've done are so sound specific that even when you play the tunes, it's kind of not recognisable. So it really depends on the song.
Okay, you left Orchestral Manoeuvres Dark in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Why?
Basically, as I was saying about the money thing, it all became so difficult being in OMD because we couldn't do the things we wanted to do. We became this touring machine that wasn't making any money. We were exhausted. We had this deal where we had to make an album a year, but we were on the road for 9 months of the year. So we had 3 months to write an album, and the latter albums that we did in that period were just the first 10 ideas Andy and I had. We had no time to kind of write a whole load of stuff and then pick the best. It was just the first 10 things went on the record. And I felt that the records were suffering. We were suffering from exhaustion because throughout the whole of the 80s, we didn't even have a holiday. We were just solidly in OMD. It was affecting our relationships. I was married. I wanted to have children. And so I said to Andy, look, I got to put the brakes on this.
Did you fall out?
Not initially. We both agreed that we should stop. It was when our lawyers got involved because we were so intertwined with the business side of things that our lawyers started fighting. So we fell out over the legal side of things. But then the big sweetener for us was that when we were fighting with the lawyers and the lawyers were involved, the lawyers suddenly realised that we were getting paid a wrong royalty rate on every CD we'd ever sold.
Okay, that's good.
So we finally made some money.
You had to break up.
We had to break up to make money.
And we were chronicling what Needle Time with my guest, Paul Humphreys, who in the arc of our story is now no longer a member of OMD. He left. So you did a couple of things out there solo. You did the listening pool, which was
I did
more or less a continuation of what you had been doing.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I decided, because Malcolm and Martin from the band, they left when I left. They didn't want to stay in the band. So so I took a few years off, and my wife had a child, and I just was a dad for a while, but I kind of got itchy feet. I wanted to do something, so I thought, what should I do? And I thought, well, so I didn't want to be in a band still at that point, so I thought, why don't I just start a record label and try to help a lot of the Liverpool bands who were struggling or didn't have record deals. Yeah. So me, Malcolm and Martin, we started a record label called Telegraph Records, and we thought to launch it, we need something to launch it. Why don't we just make a record to launch the label? So we did the listening pool. It wasn't really a band to kind of take over from OMD. It was to launch the label.
And who else was on your label?
We had China Crisis.
Okay.
We had Pete Coyle from Lotus Eaters, and several other new bands that we were helping.
And did your studio that you built back in the day, was that still a functioning?
No, we abandoned that studio. We kind of broke it up when we broke up.
Okay. And you did you had a 1-2 with Claudia Brooken
from Propaganda. Yeah, we did an album and several tours. We were kind of a touring band.
Right. But eventually you got back together with Andy and revived.
It took years. It took years because in 2000 I phoned up Andy and said, you know what, we should do this again. Because the thing was, we were in this through the 90s. Electronic music was just so out of fashion when we got to the 90s, and so no one was interested in OMD. But when we turned the millennium into the 2000s, we just started getting phone calls all the time. Andy did. I was getting phone calls saying, getting big offers to go back out on the road and make records, and we just kept turning them down. But Andy and I we'd speak and we'd say, well, look, we've been offered this, shall we do it? And then Andy was doing Atomic Kitten, and so he said, well, I've got to get this project out the way. And then I was doing 1-2 with Claudia Brooken, and he phoned up, do you want to do it? Well, I said, well, I've got this tour book now, and I'm doing a record, and it was never quite the right time until we got to 2006. So it took 6 years of talking about it before we got back to it.
What did you make of Andy's continuation of OMD, which he did for a while, and it went much less electronic? And
it did, and very much more
American pop.
Yeah,
area.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. He wanted to take the band in that direction. I mean, I wouldn't have taken the band in that direction if I'd been in, but I respect his right to do it, and I kind of allowed him to do it. I mean, I let him have my rights to the name in that period.
Did you ever play any of that material in the revived?
We play a couple of things, actually. I mean, there's a few things that he did were really good. Sailing on the Seven Seas is a great, kind of a weird pop song.
And he had some success. You mentioned Atomic Kitten, so he launched a girl pop group.
Yeah.
What did you make of that, watching from the sidelines?
He decided that, I mean, he came to the same conclusion in the 90s that there was no place for electronic music, and he thought, what am I going to do? And so he thought, well, in fact, he spoke to Carl Bartos from Kraftwerk, and it was actually Carl Bartos's idea to form a 3-girl pop group.
Well, you say there was no place for electronic music in the 90s, but acid house and techno...
All the house and techno stuff, yeah.
Electronic.
It was all electronic, but electronic pop was out of the charts. It was still going in the clubs.
Right. When you came back to it, you've come back to it fully in the digital era. It's a different technology. So what is it? How does it change what you are doing?
Well, in so many ways, it's much better because we've got rid of all the analog synths, and so Andy and I we have copy systems so that we've got all the same synths, all the same virtual synths. And the same, we use Pro Tools, which is like the sequencing package, which has replaced the multi-track tape. And we have exact systems so that when we work together, it's really, really easy to work. I mean, if it was in the analog world, I'd have to put a van of synths in. I'd have to have a van behind me with all my synths in to go up to Andy's, set them all up, plug them all in. None of them would work. But
it is a kind of forgotten thing when you go into an old electronic studio and you just see racks and racks and racks of gear that somebody's got on their laptop now.
Yeah, and it's all on a laptop now, and it all sounds really, really good. So, I mean, I did a nerdy experiment with a real Prophet 5 synth and a virtual one, and then made the same sound, and then someone made me do a blind A/B test to pick the analog and the digital, and I got it wrong. Okay. So I thought, why am I being so... Because I was a bit purist before I did that experiment.
Do you feel like you've won? There was a big division between analog music and non-synth music, and the idea of music is real and it's all that, and it's electronic music is going to be the end of pop music as we know it back in the origins of the genre, and now essentially all music is electronic music. Yeah,
it is, but there is a whole. I mean, there's so many genres now of music, and it's all kind of acceptable to people now. Electronic music is one part of it, but rock music is still unacceptable. I mean, not to me. We tried to slay that rock dragon, but it kept growing a new head.
Yeah.
So, but we're in this sort of postmodern era now, aren't we? Where everything is, all culture is kind of cyclical and repeating itself.
And now we're nostalgic for the futurist music of the past.
I know, that's it. I mean, it's a retro-futurism.
Yes.
But I mean, because we thought, you know, we always thought that we would slay the rock dragon, and electronic music would be the only thing left. But of course, that was kind of a childish view.
I don't know if you listen to the charts now.
At the moment, it's back in vogue again.
It's
true.
It's a long time since there's been a guitar band in the charts, and all music is essentially made by inputting electronic data onto grids
in a computer,
shaping it and with filters and so on.
That's right. I mean, even rock music is made that way. Now it's all put into Pro Tools and processed.
Do you, as you go out into the world now, you're meeting young musicians, I suppose, and bands that have listened to OMD and been influenced by them all their life. Do you come across a lot of that?
Yeah, we do actually. We do have people sort of citing us as an influence. Let me think. Well, there are people that have always cited us, like Moby and Radiohead and things like that.
Yes.
And LCD Sound System. And
that's a pretty cool list.
The Killers. So there's lots of bands say they've been influenced by us. But quite often they say they were influenced by Dazzle Ships.
Right.
Not really any of the rest of our catalogue, which is interesting.
Yes.
The one difficult album we made seemed to have influenced the most amount of bands.
And you're still making music, because you've had 2 albums out under the guise of the new OMD.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of, when we got back together, we thought, we just did it as a bit of a dare, really. And let's just see what the interest is for OMD. Everyone was telling us there was interest. So we did in 2007, we put 9 shows on sale, and then those 9 shows turned into 59 shows. And then we thought, oh, actually, there's a bit of interest here. And then the following year, we did an even bigger tour. And then we thought, are we just being, is it just, are we becoming a tribute band to ourselves, really, by just playing our own stuff, and do we want to do that? So we thought, well, let's dare to make a new record, and let's see how that goes. And we did The History of Modern, and that got great reviews, sold a lot, got really well received, and then we did English Electric, which got even better reviews and sold even more. So we thought, yeah, actually, we can be OMD again properly, not just be a tribute band to ourselves and play all the retro things. We can actually keep going forward, because Andy and I still have a lot of ideas and a lot of things to say.
Okay, so you're back. You've had proper success. Time for another Dazzle Ships, then, isn't it?
Well, if it is, we're not doing Dazzle Ships at the moment, because we're in the latter stages of the next record already. It's going to be finished by the end of March, so we're really excited about the new record, actually.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing it. Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Pleasure.